A big blow to tech this week as a judge says the FTC can move forward with a lawsuit against Facebook that could break up the social media giant. But is breaking up Facebook the best thing for consumers? Joining me now to discuss all of this, Geltrude and Company founder Dan Geltrude, Main Street Asset Management Chief Investment Officer Aaron Gibbs, and former Dallas Fed advisor and Quill Intelligence CEO Danielle DiMartino Booth. Good to see all of you. Aaron, I want to start with you about this. For that question, is it good for consumers to break up these big tech companies, specifically Facebook?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting, the argument really isn't for a benefit for consumers. It's a lot to do with more with advertisers. Certainly in the past, when you break up companies like Standard Oil or the telephone companies, there was a benefit because there really was monopoly. But with Facebook, you really do have a choice of whether you want to use Facebook or Instagram. For example, I use Facebook. My dog uses Instagram. So I think it's a very hard argument, and I don't necessarily see a benefit for consumers. In fact, I think it might hurt them because we're calling these social media companies to add more and more technology, add internal regulations, internal software to cut down on false accounts, content, and they need those big resources in order to help them make these platforms more safe.
Dan, what do you think about all of this? Is Facebook too big? In terms of, we're talking about privacy issues also. I mean, they've got a monopoly over your data information. What do you think, Dan?
The one thing that Republicans and Democrats seem to agree on here is they don't like big tech, specifically Facebook. And why is that? Is because they have an enormous amount of control over information. At the same time, Aaron brings up a good point related to this is about advertising as well. So I think where we're going to go here is, and breaking up is hard to do. I don't necessarily think that the government is going to be successful in breaking up Meta or Facebook. What I do think may come out of this is more regulation. And remember that just last year, the FTC had filed or had fined Facebook $5 billion for the misuse of information. So this is going to be very interesting as this all plays out.
You know, that's an interesting point that you bring up, Danielle. I want to ask you about that, about regulation. Would regulation be enough for these social media companies with the reach that they have?
You know, I think that's a very difficult question to answer. Privacy issues are a very real thing, which you rightly bring up. And, you know, I was one of the millions of people who got off of the WhatsApp application when Facebook basically said, we're going to be even more delving into your private issues. We're going to share more of this with our advertisers. So I'm not sure that regulators have the ability to do this, but I also don't think that the judge is wrong in saying that it might be appropriate for Facebook to not own all of these platforms and share everybody's private information across them.
So, Aaron, you talked about, the reach, and they need the wherewithal and the drive or the money behind it in order to handle and manage these services. But, you know, we saw this week a report come out that the teachers union, or one of the teachers unions groups, has written the social media companies to sort of suppress, the information that parents want to get out there related to that. Is there a concern about that when you're talking about the size of these companies, that they could suppress voices?
No, I think, whether they're across the board, certainly I think when it comes to sharing data, when it comes to advertising, I think that's one fair argument. Right. But when you're talking about content, suppressing information, I don't think that necessarily breaking them up makes it actually easier for you. It's actually easy for the government to add these regulations onto one very large company and say, you need to do this across all of your platforms, and therefore use the same sort of similar algorithms to make sure that there is freedom of content out there, and also controlling what we don't want out there. So I think regulators may not fully understand the complexities of what they're asking for. They want smaller companies, but they want higher level of service and regulation on top of them. Right. And I think they need to pull back and decide which is really their priority. Yeah.
So, Dan, when you talk about regulations, do you think the government can get it right? I mean, you've seen government regulation run amok. I mean, and the social media companies have huge lobbying groups in D.C. I mean, they'll possibly be helping to write some of this. What do you think, Dan?
The short answer there related to will the government get this right as far as regulations? I'm going to go with no on that. But that does not mean that they're not going to try to put regulations in place. And let's not forget, this case as it goes along, Lawrence, is not going to be limited to just Meta. Amazon, Microsoft, they're also going to be watching how this plays out, because it's not only Meta that's the issue. I mean, to me, when you talk about control over the world, Amazon has a heck of a lot more control over things that we do every day.
All right, so we're going to do a rapid fire round, 30 seconds each on the markets. Tell me, in 2022, are we going to see more volatility, markets going up? Let's start with you, Aaron. What do you think?
I think overall markets are going to go up, but I'm focusing on smaller and mid caps, because these mega caps, just like we're talking Facebook, are some of the more risky ones for 2022. Interesting.
Danielle, what do you think?
I think that the inflation is really starting to hurt companies' margins and profits and eat into what they're making. And I see the economy right now is slowing. So I think we're going to have substantially more volatility over the next few months, especially as the Federal Reserve continues to pull liquidity that's been supporting markets out of the system.
Interesting. Dan, last time we had 40-year high in inflation, we saw a recession in that year. What do you think? Was it more volatility, recession?
I see a lot more volatility in the market. That is going to be driven by inflation, which is causing the reaction from the Fed. It looks like we're going to see interest rate increases, and that is not good news for the market.
Yeah, and we're hearing predictions now, possibly 4 from those Fed district presidents. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Dan, Aaron, Danielle, really appreciate your time on that. Thank you.